Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last almost 2 years now, I have been featuring each fille du roi, or king's daughter, and getting to know their stories a little bit better. There are over 700 of them, so we have got a long way to go. We're on episode 189, so we have come a long way. And before we begin, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. We have Ko-fi and Patreon, both of which are external platforms that you can go on. I've put the links in the notes. And then we have Super Thanks, which is right on your YouTube dashboard that you can click on to donate a sum of money. So all of those are absolutely ways that you can help the channel grow. And don't forget to check out my website as well, Have Roots Will Travel, in case you're looking for any other episodes that I have done prior to that. I have an index and all that good stuff, so check that out. So this episode, 189, is Marguerite Peuvier. And she is a viewer request, and when I looked in my files, my best friend, that is her great-grandmother as well. She's got so many of them. And then the boy next door's wife. This is her, one of her great grandmothers as well. So let's have a look at its story. So Marguerite was born in 1639 in Paris, France. Her parents were Nicolas Peuvier and Marguerite Bourgeois. The church where she would have been baptized no longer exists, but it could date its existence back to 1216. It was rebuilt in the 16th century and then demolished in 1787 with the hope of rebuilding it. But a little thing like the French Revolution interfered in this plan. L'Église Saint-Sauveur was founded on the corner of Saint-Sauveur Street and the corner of Saint-Denis. There exists a plaque commemorating this historic church. Let's talk a little bit about the location where she was born in Paris, known as the 12e arrondissement, which is also known as La Bourse. And it is located on the right bank of the River Seine. The second arrondissement is one that is focused on the business activities. There's several banking headquarters that are now found here, as well as the former Paris Bourse, the stock exchange, which is why it's called the Bourse. The Paris Opera, the textile district, and just as a trivial note, the home of Grand Rex, which is the largest movie theater in Paris. So if I ever go there, I am going to go there. I definitely want to check that out. So you can see where the second arrondissement is. This is a depiction of the church as it existed. After her father's death, she would embark on the greatest journey of her life. She would embark on Le Phoenix de Flansange, which would arrive in Quebec City on June 30th, 1663, the very first boat to do so. She carried with her a dowry worth about 300 pounds. The groom that she would select and who would select her, his name was Jacques Menot de Châteauneuf. He was born in 1640 in a place called Château-Giron in France. His parents were Jean Menot and Jeanne Trochot. And the region that he was born in was Brittany. We don't go often to Brittany. And the département is Ille-et-Vilaine. And the commune, as I've said, is Château-Giron. Château-Giron has its history as early as the 3rd century, and there remain indications of these early beginnings in that village. By the 10th century, the first lord of this area died and gave the castle to his son, Géron, hence the name Château-Giron. Église Marie-Madeleine dates from the 11th century, but by the 19th century, it was time for a remodel. This is the church as it looks now. So Jacques would come to New France, but he had a profession. He was a surgeon. This is one of the rare times that I have seen this so far. They were to be married. They were married October 23rd, 1663. I do not know when Jacques arrived in New France, but he obviously was ready for her. First years were spent at Chateau Richer. Let's talk a little bit about this amazing, it means actually Castle of the Riches. In 1626, Samuel de Champlain established in Château Richer the first farm in the St. Lawrence Valley to feed the people of Quebec City. Jean Bourdon's map of 1641 is the earliest source that mentions the name Château Richer, referring only to the cape or headland on which stands the present church. But the origin of this name remains uncertain. In 1646, Olivier Le Tardif, the Lord and Chief Prosecutor, granted 20 concessions to the inhabitants of Château Richer so that they could officially establish themselves properly. In 1678, the local parish was formed, named it La Visitation de Notre-Dame. And by 1753, Château Richer became the very first organized village in New France. So the history of this place is tremendous. And it is found along Route 138 that I will be visiting. So we're going to see the Route 138, as many of you know, is the Chemin du Roi. And so we are going to be visiting that sometime this summer. Can't wait. The family would then settle on Ile d'Orléans. As many of you know, we have come to Ile d'Orléans so many times, but I always want to make sure that I explain it so that newcomers understand its importance. It's located on the St. Lawrence River. It is an island, and it's about 3 miles east of downtown Quebec City. The island was one of the very first parts of the province to be colonized by the French, and a large percentage of French Canadians can trace their ancestry to the early residents of this island. The island has been described as the microcosm of traditional Quebec and as the birthplace of Francophones in North America. The name of the island was actually known as Grande Île, Sainte Marie, and Saint Laurent. And I tell you this in case you're doing research and come across these names and go, oh, is this the same Ile d'Orléans? Eventually it was changed in honor of the second son of King Francis I, Henri II, who was the Duke of Orléans. And obviously you can see why the first settlers were attracted to it for the lushness of it, and it's a very fertile soil. You can also see that Ile d'Orléans is separated into 6 different, very distinct communities. So we have Sainte-Famille, which was the very first, and it was founded in 1661, and followed by another 4 parishes in 1679 and 1680. And then finally, the 6th was founded in 1689. By 1685, there were about 1,200 people that lived there. And it's important to note the different villages that exist because when you're visiting, you want to know where your people were at. So Jacques, this is the 1660, the one on top is the 1666 census. Jacques Menot, 27 habitants. They don't call him a surgeon. Marguerite de Peuvier, 28. Jacques was 6 months. And Jean Leclerc, 18. He was a domestic servant. Then we have Jacques Menot in the 1667 census, 27. Marguerite Peuvier, you see how they changed the spelling. You have to really stretch your imagination. And then we have Jacques. And then we have 3 alpha, so they own 3 acres of land. About 3, I shouldn't say 3 acres, about probably a little less than 2 acres of land. So they in all would have 10 children. Let's have a look. We have Anne, who died in infancy. Jacques, no other information, but it does appear that he became an assistant surgeon following in his father's footsteps. François would die after the 1681 census. Marie-Madeleine married Maître Meunier and had 8 children, 7 of whom made it. Joseph married Marianne Lizotte and had 2 children, 1 of whom made it. René would marry Elisabeth Rochon and have 10 children, 8 of whom would make it. Françoise would marry Michel Pelletier. His mother was Marie-Madeleine Morisseau, who we featured in Thea Marie episode number 7. Angélique would marry Joseph Levesque and have 7 children, all of whom would make it. Joseph's mother was Fille du Roi Jeanne Marguerite Chevalier, who we profiled in episode 35. Reine married Joseph Ouellet and had 11 children, 9 of whom made it. Her mother was Anne Rivet, who we featured in episode 64 of Fille du Roi. And Catherine married Noël Lizotte and had 14 children, only 7 of whom made it. And then we have the 1681 census. We have Jacques, Marguerite. Uh, you can see that they actually are 10 years apart, but on the reverse side. Alpha, François, Joseph, René, Madeleine, François, Anne, Marguerite. They have 2 cows and between 7 and 8 acres of land. So Jacques would die suddenly at 50 years of age. He would die in 1690 on the 19th of December at Hôtel Dieu. This is so often the case. One man dies and another arrives. Let's have a look at who came. Second groom was Guillaume Lizotte. He was born in 1645 in Saint-Pierre de la Gravelle in Montviette. His parents were Robert Lizotte and Catherine Joanne. He was from the Normandy region and the Calvados department. And there are about 175 people that live here now. And it has merged into Saint-Pierre-en-Auge. But the church where Guillaume would have been baptized still stands, as it has since the 11th century. Guillaume would come to New France in 1670 and would marry Anne Pelletier, who was the 3rd generation Quebecer, the granddaughter of Guillaume Pelletier. So on October 10th, 1696, at Quebec City, we have a second chance at love for both of them. So Guillaume and Marguerite would settle at Rivière-Well. Let's talk a little bit about this really quite amazing place, actually, historical. They would settle, this little town was actually named after the Rivière-Well, which was in honor of another gentleman named Well, but his pronunciation was Dhouel. So somehow along the line, it became the spelling that it is. He was a member of the Company of the 100 Associates and was a colleague of Samuel de Champlain. So this kind of was the evolution of Rivière-Well. And the seigneurie of this place was granted in 1672 by the intendant Jean Talon to Jean-Baptiste François Deschamps de la Boutellerie, a nobleman from Normandy. Remember, Guillaume comes from Normandy as well. The seigneurie was thereafter called La Boutellerie, which, by the way, actually means bottle factory. Not sure of the origins of this in France, but it would be interesting to dig into this someday. This seigneur truly worked his land and was a forward thinker. He actually lived on his land, in fact, was buried there. So we have to assume that Guillaume probably knew him, is probably part of those founding pioneers. You can see how big a presence Guillaume had by the size of his lot. And I also want to point out Noël Lizotte is one of his sons, who is one of the sons that married Marguerite's daughter. 2 of Marguerite's children married into Lizottes, making her the mother-in-law and him the father-in-law. So I would suspect that's how they met and got to know each other. So that's always interesting, the just the interlinking that goes on in these historical times. So Guillaume would pass away in 1706. So they had, about 10 years together. Marguerite, he was 61. Marguerite would die 3 years later at 70 years of age. Both of them are buried at Rivière-Well. As a final tribute, on the island of Orleans, Ile d'Orléans, Marguerite and her first husband Jacques are mentioned on that famous monument because they were one of the early pioneers of that village. So this past Christmas, my best friend gave me all of the editions of Les Filles du Roi from the Société d'Histoire des Filles du Roi. They're just an amazing series. So for further research about Marguerite, I would urge you to check out the link that I have and see if that's something. You can buy a hard copy or Kindle edition. So they're just amazing books of resources and just connections. I would urge you to check that out. As always, I'd love to share my resources. We have la Société des Filles du Roi, the Quebec Genealogical Society, Nos Origines, Wikitree, of course, the Filles du Roi Descendants Facebook page, Généalogie Québec, and Société d'Histoire des Filles du Roi. I've listed all of that for your research pleasure. So, all in all, Marguerite had an incredible life. And she kept going, and she just kept going to different places. Chateau Richer, followed by L'Île d'Orléans, followed by Rivière-Wells. She was obviously a woman who wasn't afraid of a challenge. And as of 1729, she would have 137 descendants from her first marriage. Just a truly astonishing and very brave woman that we want to pay homage to, we want to thank, and we bless her memory. Thank you, Marguerite. I also want to say thank you to my patrons and supporters. Couldn't do it without you. Love your support, and I'm so grateful for it. Until I see you on episode 190, au revoir.